Hello folks, well we're back again to talk about Git remotes and pull and push and that kind of thing this time around. I'm not going to play with the Linux command window in this one since this is pretty much exactly what you're doing for your regular forks and clones and whatnot in the lab sessions, but we'll go through the basics of the theory. So, the idea is quite often we're going to find that we're not working in a repository that's just us. Right? In the examples we've been playing with the last couple of sessions, we created our own little repository from scratch. We worked on it. We edited it. You know, we could add and commit as we wanted, but we weren't really worried about coordinating things with anybody else. So what quite often happens if we've got multiple people working on something is that we'll have one kind of source of all wisdom version maintained someplace central. So for instance, something like the instructor version of the projects. And then everybody has their own clone of that, their own copy of that they work in. And when needed, they give their changes back to whoever's keeping track of that central one, and whoever's managing that central one decides which changes to merge into the central one. So if there's 5 different developers, then we might have a team lead who is deciding, okay, I'm going to merge developer 1. Developer 1's changes have been tested and approved. I'm going to merge them into the one central version. So if that's the case, then everybody needs to be working on their own copy of the code, if you like, their own version of the code. But when somebody else's changes get pushed into that central version, every developer needs to be able to grab those and incorporate them into their own local copy as well. So you've got this one central copy that you're pulling stuff from to merge with your own changes, and then periodically you're pushing your changes back to potentially be included with that central version. So this notion of pull and push, pull is where I'm grabbing changes from that central master copy someplace, and push is where I'm sending my changes back from my local copy to wherever the source happens to be. So in the way we've got our lab set up is there's actually a kind of a 2-tier system on the central server where there's the instructor has their copy, and then each student has got a copy on a copy of their own on the central server, and each student has a copy of their own on Otter, let's say, that they're working on. So they're pulling from their copy on the central server and pushing to their copy on the central server. And if the instructor wanted to pick and choose between student submissions and merge those into the instructor copy, or if the instructor wanted to make changes to that one central version, they could. And with the lab, or with the labs as this term's project goes on, you want to be able to pull stuff from that instructor's central copy as well. So you've got this idea, we want to be able to pull changes from different places and push changes back somewhere. So the notion of a remote is the notion of this thing, this one original someplace, the instructor version for instance, that I want to be able to grab stuff from. And then there's other repositories that I want to be able to pull and push to. So we'll take a look at how all this works. So again, primary version might be stored on a different server someplace, like with ours, in which case when we want to access it, we have to be able to specify the server, so with a URL, and the specific project repository that we want to work with. And again, we've often got this notion of some central organized structure to keep track of the one true master version, and then maybe each developer's got a version of their own there, and then each developer's got their own local version, or each student's got their own local version. That's what they're editing today. So, we need some kind of a mechanism to go through and coordinate how all of this works. So if you want to take a repository from someplace else and make a local copy of it that you can work in, you clone it, right? So git clone, and then the URL specifies, what server and what the repository name is, and it's going to go off and create a repository with the same name wherever we are now on our local server. So if we also want to be able to take changes that somebody else has made on this one true version, this one source of wisdom someplace, so for instance the instructor version of our projects, then we can say I want to be able to refer to that one too. I want to be able to pull from that one too. So the way we do it is by specifying a remote. We say, this is a remote version of the repository that I want to be able to grab stuff from. So the way we do that is by telling git, I want to add a remote, so git remote add, what you want to call it, and then where it's actually located, so whatever the server and project name is there. Right, so you can have a different name for your repository here than wherever it is on the server. When you want to grab new changes from that remote version, you just say git pull. If you want to push changes to the one you cloned from, right, so we can pull stuff from this remote version and we can push stuff to the one we cloned from using git pull and git push. And you can get more specific, right? There's all sorts of variations on these where you can say things like, I want to pull one specific branch from the remote, or I want to push one specific branch back. But that's the basic idea, right? It gives us a way to pull from a different location than we're pushing to. Again, if we're looking at git status, we can tell us, it can tell us if there's a difference between what we've got locally and what we cloned from. So it'll tell you if you've got more commits locally than the repository you cloned from. You can also do things like fetch that doesn't automatically try to merge in new changes right when you do a pull. So git fetch and the repository name. You can check out what's different between your version and what's in another repository someplace. You can if you've done a fetch, you can merge them explicitly if you want to. Right, so this is all kind of lumped together if you do a git pull. So again, this is essentially what we've been doing with our projects. It's just a little bit more information on what's actually taking place there. So this is obviously something that you have to practice with as part of the labs, as part of the project, but hopefully that part is a little bit intuitive by now, especially if you've been with us for a couple of years now. You've done this a whole bunch of times. You just now have a little bit of an explanation on what's going on. All right, we will leave it there for now. We're going to come back and talk about more in the way of Linux and Bash over the next week or so.